On today's show, the Capitals prepare to take on the Columbus Blue Jackets. Who will be in the lineup? And I'll tell you why I think Jakub Vrana will make the team.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the SiriusXM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the last 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minute Cast, available wherever you find your podcasts. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the Capitals as they prepare to take on the Columbus Blue Jackets. Who's going to be in the lineup? We saw the Capitals take great steps forward in the last game with more of the veterans, more of the big pieces that will be a part of this team going forward. Which of those players will be in versus Columbus? I'll talk about that. A little bit later, I'll talk about Jakub Vrana and why I think he will make the team. Yes, I think he will break camp with the roster. I'll talk about that. And then in the final segment, I'll say why I think that Logan Thompson is the answer in net for the Capitals. But just to get it going here, talking about who is going to be in the lineup versus Columbus Friday evening. This team is coming off a huge win, and it was due in large part because we saw the big guns out there. We kind of started to peel aside the players that we know aren't going to crack the roster, but got a good chance to see some young talent, some players that we haven't seen with the team skate so far. It was really exciting. I'm going to be honest with you. I was really excited about seeing Chychrun out there. It was also good to see players that were huge on this team last year and Dylan Strome and other new additions like Duhaime, that I think that this team is trending in the right direction. And I know it was just one preseason victory, but it felt good to come off a big win, considering that it had been a bit of a rough start to the preseason. And of course, you can't read too much into it because it's the preseason, and ultimately these games are kind of like just training, except versus competition, real competition. But in any event, a win is a win, and it felt good for the Capitals to get a big win. Logan Thompson, wow, he exceeded my expectations, and I'll talk about him a little bit later in the show. So we're hoping that the Capitals can build on the momentum that they gained from a big win in the last game that they played. Let's hope that's possible, and ultimately who is going to be in the lineup. The Capitals are gearing up for their upcoming preseason game against the Blue Jackets. The roster for the game features a mix of seasoned veterans and up-and-coming prospects, providing an opportunity for players to showcase their skills on the ice. Because like I said, at the end of the day, that is what this is all about, is just kind of sizing up the talent in your organization and making some tough decisions. I mean, let's be honest here. There is a lot of questions about who's going to crack the roster. Later, I'll talk about Jakub Vrana, but even Mirshnyshenko, Andrew Crystal, Ethan Frank, these kind of players that are kind of on the cusp of taking their hockey careers to the next level. So to say that these preseason games hold no significance would be short-sighted. There is a lot at stake for a lot of these players, and even the players that have, their name kind of solidified on the opening night roster, for them to work on their game and get in some real reps against some real competition. I think that is huge. Key players such as Alex Ovechkin, Dylan Strome, and Andrew Mangiapane will be taking the ice alongside regulars like Jakob Chychrun and John Carlson. Goalie Charlie Lindgren is expected to make a return, aiming to solidify his position as the team's top goaltender. And I was thinking about this, and I heard Joe B mention it as well. Is do you think that Charlie Lindgren was at home and like, wow, this guy is really good? And do you think that that shattered his confidence at all? Or do you think that Charlie Lindgren is so confident that like, yeah, Logan Thompson played a good game, but I'm still good or better than that? For me, I'd be thinking like, wow, that guy's really good. I better be on my toes. And then I'm thinking to myself, this is exactly why Brian McClellan did this, to bring out the best in each other. A friendly, competitive rivalry that I think will bring out the best in these two netminders. That is the hope. But what we saw in the first game with Logan Thompson in there, I'm loving it. It was quite something. But talking about prospects and hopefuls, the game will also provide a platform for prospects and hopefuls to make their case for a permanent spot in the lineup. Players such as Jakub Vrana, Andrew Cristall, even Mirshnyshenko, Ethan Frank, Pierre Dubé, and Henrik Rubinski will have another opportunity to impress head coach Spencer Carbery. And as we take a look at it, what positions are they vying for? It is that extra skater that's probably not going to be in the lineup night in and night out. But you take a look at even Mirshnyshenko, I think he's grown by leaps and bounds. You take a look at Jakub Vrana, even though he didn't play some of his best hockey in game one, took steps forward in the last game. And then Ethan Frank, Pierre Dubé, and Henrik Rubinski, I think, are the outsiders looking in. It's going to be very interesting for Vrana, Cristall, and even Mirshnyshenko. That's just my assessment. Seeing what I see. I don't know if the head coaches and the staff are seeing, but those are the three finalists, if you will, that I think stand the best chance at cracking the roster. The competition, though, is fierce for the forward position is heating up with standout performances from players like Cristall and Mirshnyshenko on the defensive end. Ethan Bear is looking to maintain his place in the team after a challenging previous season. And I'm just going to be honest with you. I've seen a little bit of good from Ethan Bear, but I think that we need to see a whole lot more. I did not have him penciled in the opening night roster in my D pairings, and that's just my assessment. But I've also seen the projections from other Capitals insiders and NHL insiders, and of course many of those were drawn up before we knew that Ethan Bear was even going to be in the lineup. But regardless, even if I knew Ethan Bear was an option, I just wouldn't have put him in the mix. And it's nothing against him. I just don't think that his game is necessarily where the other blue liners that I've seen. There's players that I think could show more. And some players that I thought could have been on the move last summer, like I said, talked about TVR. It's going to be interesting. And you take a look at it, you got Carlson and you got Chikrin, Matt Roy, Faravari. There's some great options out there. So to sneak one of these players in here, not to mention Alex Alexiev as well, that it is going to be difficult. Rasmus Sandin is back with the team now as well after having visa issues, that it is going to be that friendly competition and maybe not so friendly at certain points. But I think at the end of the day, this is the making of the perfect storm. And I think I have a lot of faith in Spencer Carbery and Chris Patrick and all the decision makers that it will be the best options out on the ice. They're putting them through their paces to ultimately see what they have in the tank. It's like taking that new car out on a test drive and pushing it to the floor to see how it reacts. Does it sputter, or does it have some giddy up in its step? Those are the things to look for. So there's a lot at stake. The forwards, like I'm talking about here, are the ones that are kind of taking the spotlight. But I think there's also some questions on the blue line as well. Is Ethan Bear good enough to join the opening night roster? A lot of questions, and maybe some of those will be answered Friday evening during Columbus, the game against Columbus. The complete roster for the upcoming game includes a mix of forwards, defensemen, and goaltenders showcasing depth. So let's take a look at who is ultimately going to be out on the ice. It's going to be Ovechkin, Vrana, Milano, Strome, Scarbosa, McMichael, Cristall, Frank Rubinski, Mirshnyshenko, Dubé, and Mangiapane. If we take a look at defensemen, it'll be Iorio, It'll be Chikrin, Bear, Alexiev, Carlson, Lieberman, and Massey, and goaltenders Clay Stevenson and Charlie Lindgren. It is going to be my hunch that it will be Charlie Lindgren for the duration. I think we're kind of the point of the preseason where we need to alternate in goalies. We know what we have in Clay Stevenson. I think we know. Let's get a good glimpse at Charlie Lindgren, knock some of the rust off, blow some dust off of it, and see if he's still up to the task at hand. A lot of pressure on him as Logan Thompson really kind of, shot a shot across the Capitals' bow, and in a lot of ways, Charlie Lindgren's bow. Like, okay, you saw what I have. What do you have? That it's going to be interesting to see how this all shakes out. I'm loving it. What I've seen so far, even in the first preseason games, again, it's all about assessment and it's all about living up to expectations. All right, so coming up here after the break, I will talk about Jakub Vrana and why I think he has what it takes to break camp with the team. I'll discuss straight ahead. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. So if you are involved in HR, the hiring and firing, take a load off with Indeed. They make it so much easier, and listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about it on the Locked On Capitals podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. GameTime has a new feature called GameTime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. GameTime Picks filters out all the fluff to show you incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And let me tell you something, that is something that's always frustrating for me. My favorite team's playing, my favorite band's playing, comedian, whatever the case might be, and it's incredibly difficult to find tickets. It's confusing oftentimes. And what are the seats going to look like? What is the view of the stage going to look like from where I'm sitting? Well, Game Time makes it that much easier. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON. NHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So one of the players that's on the verge of greatness, of making the team, is Jakub Vrana. And I'm going to tell you in this segment why I think he is going to be the one selected. And I'll tell you, it's pretty easy conclusion to draw. If the way I'm seeing the playing field is the same way that Spencer Carbery and his staff is seeing the playing field, is that Jakub Vrana will be selected by this team because he's going to be the extra skater. He's going to be the healthy scratch from time to time. And if you look at it, it's an easy conclusion to draw. Is Andrew Crystal, is he going to be on this team as a healthy scratch? Do you think that he's going to be best served being a healthy scratch? The same goes for Ivan Miroshnichenko. Is that what's best for him? Ethan Frank, Pierre Dubé, these guys that have a higher ceiling and are ultimately still growing their game. Do you think the Capitals are really going to select one of those players that definitely are going to be a part of the future for the Capitals? Or do you think they'll go with a guy like Vrana that is on a professional tryout and at the end of the day, a veteran and a guy that I think will be comfortable being a scratch or an extra? And I think that that is the easy conclusion to draw. I think of no worse thing than Andrew Crystal making the team, but he's going to spend the duration of the season on the bench, or Mirshnyshenko, or any of these kind of guys, that if I'm seeing the playing field laid out before me the same way everyone else does, I think it's a fairly easy conclusion to draw that it's going to be Jakub Vrana being the guy on the team. Now, there are certain outliers, certain other possibilities to consider. Is Sonny Milano, is he quite, what we thought? I had him penciled in. Are there any injuries between now and the start of the season that he could take on a bigger role? But when you take a look at it, I ultimately think that with these players that I'm talking about, this young talent, they're going to be players that are going to be extras, a healthy scratch on any given night. And Jakub Vrana just makes sense. And I'm not saying that he's going to be on the team just because he's good enough to warm up the bench. But what I'm saying is he's at the point of his career that kind of makes sense. I think that, you take a look, there is some upward mobility and upward trajectory when you're talking about the likes of Crystal, Mirshnyshenko, Dubé, these kind of guys, that I don't think that would help their case at all, spending a lion's share of the season on the bench. So that's my assessment. It'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out. But for me, it just makes sense. Jakub Vrana's professional trial. Jakub Vrana, that Czech winner we all love, is currently at the Washington Capitals training camp on a PTO after becoming a free agent last summer. Despite a challenging start to the preseason, his recent standout performance has set him apart in the competition for a roster spot. Now, don't get me wrong, he is still going to have to excel. He's still going to have to prove himself to get on the opening night roster. But if we can see a lot what we saw in the last game in his subsequent games coming up here, I think that he's a lock at getting that position. But talking about competition and determination, and one of the things from watching the interview is he's a very kind of humble, not a very verbose, but a confident guy. He's used to playing under pressure. And I think that he's up for the challenge. He doesn't seem overwhelmed by the pressure. I think that in a lot of ways, it's feeding his determination. Talking about that competition and determination, Vrana acknowledges the tough competition he faces to secure a place in the lineup, particularly with players like Miro, Frank, Crystal vying for spots as well. However, he is determined to demonstrate his abilities and earn his place on the team. Underline, earn. I don't want to view him as a consolation prize or a participation ribbon. What I'm saying is I think that he has the raw talent to earn a spot on the team as an extra. And if someone gets injured, maybe a bigger role. But again, to circle back, I just don't see a scenario where it's going to be Miro, Frank, Crystal, one of these players that's going to be a healthy scratch. I think that would stymie their growth. So in that regard, that just doesn't make sense. Acknowledgement of support. He credits the coaching staff and his teammates for his confidence, emphasizing their support and effective communication. Listen, Capitals fans, we love Jakub Vrana. He's a likable guy. The players like him. Joe B always talks glowingly about him. He's just well-liked within the Capitals organization, among the fan base. And it's not just that. It's not about being a nice guy. It's about how you can perform on the ice. Great skater, a pretty good shot. He's not the total package, but he's a pretty good player, and ultimately why he's at where he's at right now. But focusing on optimism, I think that when you're at this point of your career, you can't think about worst case scenario. You deal with worst case scenario when it happens, when they bring him into the office and say, hey, Jakub, how about you take a seat? I mean, he knows what's coming when he hears that then you deal with it. You cannot let that negativity enter into your mind, or you're going to be done. It's going to be curtains for your time with the Capitals. I think he needs to continue to do what he's done and be optimistic and go out there and play the best hockey that he absolutely can. While he acknowledges the significance of potentially returning to the team that launched his NHL career, he remains focused on taking it day by day and making the most of each opportunity. Vrana is optimistic about his current situation and is approaching each day with a committed consciousness to improvement. And that's the right attitude. I mean, he is no rookie to the league and a high ceiling. I mean, I don't want to talk about Vrana like he is this, grizzled old vet that's on the back nine of his career. There's a pretty good upside if he chooses to bring it out. But oftentimes when I think about Vrana and before he even came back to this team on the PTOs, like I remember Vrana when he left this team, when the Capitals had seen enough, is that it's getting a consistent performance from him night in, night out, game in, game out, that maybe a depth role is exactly what the doctor ordered. I don't, think that he is a guy that's ever going to be in the top six again. I don't think, even taking a look at the roster, he's going to be a guy on the fourth line. I think he's a guy that's going to be good enough to be used sparingly. And that's just where he's at in his career. I ultimately think at the end of the day, he will make the cut and make the team. It just makes sense. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about Logan Thompson and why I think he is the perfect netminder at just the right time. Yes, I know I've sung the praises of Charlie Lindgren, but what I saw in net really has me impressed. And to think that Charlie Lindgren is the other guy in the equation, this net-minding tandem is going to be one to be reckoned with. I'll discuss straight ahead. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And listen, there is a lot of football being played on any given Sunday. And some of the games you're into, some of the games that you're not into. But say it's a whole weekend of games and you're thinking to yourself, man, my team's not playing and this is kind of boring. How about open up the FanDuel app, put a little bit of money on the game? All of a sudden, those games are that much more exciting. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And make sure and join the Locked On Capitals Insiders. There's a lot of exclusive content, exclusive videos, exclusive short form podcasts, all of those things. Just check out the link in the show description. All right, in this next segment here, we're going to talk about Logan Thompson and why he is the perfect netminder at this time. And, when you take a look at it, the Capitals are coming off last season with Charlie Lindgren kind of saving the Capitals bacon in a lot of ways. If it was not for Charlie Lindgren, the Capitals would have not made it to the playoffs. Period. End of report. That's all she wrote. But you take a look at it, that Darcy Kemper did not live up to expectation. And I've beat the horse and ad nauseum about why I think he wasn't given a fair shake. That's all in the rearview mirror. Logan Thompson was a guy that the Capitals traded for, and it was the perfect storm, a perfect addition to this team. And it's going to be very competitive as both Logan and Charlie are entering into contract years. So you're going to see the best of these two netminders. And at the end of the day, one of those netminders will be given an extension, and one of those netminders will be on to the next one, the perception of the greener pasture, if you will. But, and it's too early to know for sure if it's going to be Thompson, if it's going to be Lindgren, but it is going to be interesting. In the last game, we saw something that was very encouraging. That is Logan Thompson in the netminding tandem for the Capitals. The Capitals had their first opportunity to evaluate Logan Thompson's performance in goal during their game against the Devils on Wednesday night. Thompson, a 27-year-old goaltender, was acquired by the Caps from the Golden Knights at the 2024 NHL Draft in exchange for 2 draft picks. Not too bad. Thompson's performance. Thompson played a key role in leading the Caps to their first preseason victory, making 25 saves on 28 shots in the 5-3 win, despite the Capitals falling behind 1-0 due to sloppy zone play. Thompson's solid goaltending kept them in the game and allowed them to dominate the final 2 periods. And it wasn't just that. The coach was loving it. Spencer Carbery was eating it up. Following the game, head coach Spencer Carbery praised Thompson's exceptional performance, particularly highlighting his strong start and crucial saves during the intense moments when the opposing team had significant scoring opportunities. Cool under pressure is how I would generalize his performance. Carbery also commended the team's offensive efforts and emphasized the value of Thompson's ability to maintain in a narrow goal margin. Pretty good. And you know that in a lot of ways, the Devils threw the kitchen sink at the Capitals later in the game when they pulled their netminder. Thompson stood tall in net. Thompson's skill and confidence, because as a netminder, confidence is huge. Thompson demonstrated his skill by making several impressive saves throughout the game, only allowing a goal from tough deflection and a well-placed shot by Jack Hughes during a 6-on-5 situation. He credited the team's defensive efforts, providing him with manageable shots, enabling him to quickly find his rhythm. Thompson expressed confidence in facing formidable opponent like the Devils, attributing success to the team's collective effort. So when you take a look at it, the Devils, they made it close towards the end. He was under fire. He did allow some goals, but at the end of the day, he kept the Capitals in the game. And, I think that to a certain extent, the Capitals were under duress towards the end of the game. And he was the guy that if he wasn't standing tall, if he wasn't confident, the Capitals could have definitely lost that game last night. They found a way to get it done, and ultimately why they picked up the big dub. Thompson's standout moment, his standout moment came when he made a remarkable glove save on a backdoor tip by Stefan Nason during a crucial power play opportunity for the Devils. Despite pressure from the Devils in the third period, Thompson's exceptional performance was highlighted by defenseman Jakub Vrana, who credited the goaltender providing the team with a much-needed boost in thwarting numerous scoring opportunities. That endears himself to his teammates, that there is a guy in net that's a brick wall that is going to be tough to get by. So Thompson's outlook, it's going to be interesting. Although Thompson is expected to serve as Charlie Lindgren's backup at the beginning of the season, he has shown that he is capable of assuming the starter role if necessary. Absolutely. I would definitely not view it as a number one, number two. They're both kind of 1A and 1B type situation. Following his trade request from Vegas earlier in the offseason, Thompson expressed his excitement to be a part of the Caps and praised the team's strong sense of camaraderie and exclusivity. With 3 preseason games remaining, Thompson's impressive performance has positioned him well within the team as they prepare for the upcoming season. So there is a lot to like about his game, and I think that we're just starting to see some of it. I still think that there is room for growth, but not a lot. If you take a look at how he played out on the ice, it was pretty much, exactly what the Capitals were looking for. And, like I talked about, that there was some question marks when it came to last season and when it came to Darcy Kemper about which direction they were going to go. It was my assessment that it could have been Hunter Shepard and Charlie Lindgren, but I didn't know that they had an option like Logan Thompson in the mix. So when you take a look at it, it was a solid outing by him in general. But you take a look even at the Devils and what they were able to accomplish, getting goals from Brendan Dillon out there and Nico Hischier, that it was quite a game. Jack Hughes, that, he did allow some goals out there, but, there's never going to be a situation, or rarely is there a situation where you have a perfect slate each and every game. I liked what I saw in his game. I'm looking for a whole lot more of it in the future. And, but, just initial takes on his game, I love it. I think that he puts the Capitals in an exceptional position, like I spoke about in yesterday's podcast. Some teams struggle to have one good netminder that's worthwhile. You take a look at the New Jersey Devils last season. It was a turnstile in net that the Capitals have a really great option or options in both Logan Thompson and Charlie Lindgren. The Capitals are sitting in a good position when it comes to the netminding department. Listen, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Washington Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that are watching this on YouTube and listening on the audio side. You are what makes this show successful. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.